Nhexus, level 15 upgrade. Today Nhexus will become a VXL with the help of this Traxxas Velineon system. A huge shout out and thank you goes to 13 Kawasaki 13 for donating to me the Velineon VXL 3S, the motor cap, and the ESC plate. A second shout out and thank you goes to A-Town Clown 23, also known as Kevin Major. He's the one who donated the motor. Thank you both for making this happen, and now, without further delay, it's time to turn Nhexus into a VXL. First thing I'm going to do is go ahead and pop on the motor cap. To make things a bit easier, I'm going to go ahead and remove the rear wing. First thing I'm going to replace is the motor. In order to get to the motor, I need to go ahead and remove the rear right tire. Just slide the tire off. There's a little bar that I need to take off, plus a washer. Just set those to the side, and now I can work on removing the transmission box cover, which is held in with 2 screws. With that out of the way, I can now take out the motor, which is held in with 2 more screws, one on top and one on bottom. With those taken care of, since the pinion gear is small enough, I can just pull the motor right out and unplug it from the ESC. As for the motor heatsink, I'm just going to take that off the brushed motor and save it for later. I'm not going to need this motor anymore, however I am going to still need this pinion gear. So I'm going to remove, or just loosen, the grub screw that holds the pinion gear to the shaft of the motor. And I'm going to go ahead and use the same 2 screws that held in the brush motor to screw in the Velineon one. I'm not going to tighten the screws down all the way because I do need to be able to move this around to adjust it when I attach the pinion gear. This needs to be installed while being perfectly parallel with the spur gear. Once those are lined up, I can go ahead and tighten that grub screw. Next, I need to go ahead and align the pinion gear perfectly with the spur gear. You can use a piece of paper, however, I just like to do it by eye. Once the spur and pinion gear have the right spacing between them, I can go ahead and tighten these 2 screws down all the way. Now I can go ahead and reattach the transmission box cover. The 2 screws that I removed earlier, one is longer than the other. Longer one goes on top, shorter one on bottom. And finally, I can reattach the tires. Slide on that washer, push it all the way down, get that little bar, slide it through the hole, and there's a little slot that's on the back of the wheel. I just got to slide that bar into that slot and reattach the 4mm nut. Now that the motor's taken care of, now it's time for the ESC. The first step is removing the 4 screws that are located on the top of the receiver box. With those screws out of the way, I can now take off the 2 top parts of the receiver box. Underneath, you'll see all the wires that plug into the receiver. I need to unplug channel 2. Then feed it through the top of the receiver box. With the ESC completely unplugged, I can go ahead and take it off the ESC plate, and it's only held down with 2 screws. When you compare the XL5 to the VXL 3S, you can easily see that the XL5 is much thinner than the VXL 3S, so I'm going to need a bigger plate. That is why they include this for the Bandit and the Rustler. You don't have to worry about this with the Stampede or Slash. So I'm going to have to remove this plate in order to put in the new one, and it's only held in with 4 screws. With the new plate installed, I can go ahead and attach the ESC. Then I have to go ahead and feed the ESC cable through the top of the waterproof receiver box and plug it back into channel 2. Now I got to pull all the cables out and make sure that this sits in there perfectly flat with that blue seal fitting in between the groove. Now that the top is flush with the bottom, I'm going to hold down the box, put in the screws, and screw them down. With those screws back in, now I have to go ahead and feed all the cables into the receiver box and make sure they fit in there as nice as possible. And there we go. Now I can go ahead and plug the ESC into the motor. Go ahead and pull one cable in through at a time. Start off with blue, then yellow, and finally white. In order for the body to fit on there properly, I do have to pull this as tight as it'll go. Now I'm going to go ahead and install 11.1 LiPo battery to test this thing out. Go ahead and turn on the radio and turn on the VXL. Now I have to program the radio into this, so I'm just going to go ahead and push and hold it until it turns red. Let it go, blink once, hold down the trigger, blink twice, put in reverse, and it's set. Now I can finally reinstall the fin and put the body back on. And Nhexus is finally a VXL. That was a level 15 upgrade. Thank you again, A-Town Clown 23 and 13 Kawasaki 13 for making this happen.